Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you guys. And we are recording this on the week of your NBA finals. Your NBA.
Your New York Knicks.
I have to say it's a game that it doesn't have a blue line. I don't understand it. Whatever. There's some excellent things going on. New York is going crazy, and let's hope everybody stays safe. That's
Okay, it doesn't have a blue line, and it's not played on ice, but the
Yes.
Knicks wear blue, and there are lines,
Right.
and they're cold as ice.
And they're cold as ice.
And they play in the same place the Rangers play.
That's right. Well, we're taking the liberty of starting with a little levity, even though things in the world are fragile, and we're also praying for a little bit of security,
Peace.
a little bit peace. Yes,
A little bit.
which is not what this parsha is about. This amazing parsha, Shlach Lekha. This is not a parsha that I would equate with peace. I would say this is a parsha that reflects truly one of the great crises in the Torah. We could see it opposite the golden calf episode. Here we have at the beginning of the parsha, Moses, or God says to Moses, "Shlach lecha anashim," send forth people, send forth men, really. Vayaturu et eretz Canaan, so that they will tour, they will scout the land of Canaan. Asher ani noten livnei Israel, that I'm giving to the children of Israel, and they're choosing one person from each tribe, and they name all the people. Those names are very interesting, etc., etc., etc. We have a bit of a debate here on the purpose or on the real story here, which is God saying this to Moses, or is Moses coming to God and God is ratifying what Moses wants? And the reason why I say this is because we have another account of this in the book of Deuteronomy, in which this is an idea that is generated from below as opposed to above. So we could arrive at some kind of reconciliation, and I'm going to turn to Barry for the reconciliation. I think Rashi is the one that reconciles these two positions, and if you can just give us a digest of what Rashi says here.
So, as you said, Elliot, in Bamidbar, in Parasha Shlach, or Parsha this week, it seems clear that God is telling Moses to send the spies, what we call the spies. But in Deuteronomy, the demand comes from the people. So Rashi reads Shlach Lecha as God saying to Moses, you send them if that's what you want to do. It's not my decision. And I think the way that Rashi understands the statement of God is that it's a response to Moses. That when we read it as the first verse of the Parsha, we think that God is initiating the conversation. Rashi suggests, and I think some of the other commentators on the page as well, that perhaps this was the second statement in the conversation, that Moses had already said something, and now God is responding. So God is telling Moses, this is your decision, not mine. I'm just telling you that if you do it, it's on you. And the larger question, I think, which also relates to this conversation between Moses and God, is the one of the central questions of the Parsha is, what is the land supposed to mean to us? And that's really at the root of what happens when the spies come back.
Well, I want to go before we get to that and ask, what do you think the purpose is? And how would you answer that question? What is the purpose of the delegation to Canaan? Is it something if God is telling Moses to do this, or is it something else if the people are initiating it and Moses is simply ratifying it?
So before Jeremy talks, I just want to say it's hard to imagine why God would want to have spies sent, now that I think of it, other than the fact that it seems to be the pashut shot of the sentence.
Well, I want to share my idea. I'm going to get Jeremy in on this. and I want to put out my thesis that you can shoot down with all of your artillery. Go ahead.
No, you
Oh,
You want me to
set
put down
it,
my
set
thesis?
it on up. Yeah, set it on up.
My thesis is as follows, okay? And this is based on my experience as a traveler and my experience greeting travelers and a little bit of a romantic idea, which I'm prone to. And the idea is that whenever we've had a special guest that has come back from a trip, we receive that guest with what is a vestige of pomp and ceremony. We don't bring out pomp and ceremony, but there is a kind of ritualistic reception of a person that's gone for a trip. Usually in my congregation and usually in our lives and in the synagogue, it's when someone has gone to Israel, they come back, and I know this from, I just feel this so personally. Every time I'm away, I go to Israel, I come back, and even if it's, the most personal of personal trips, which my last trip was, new grandchild, very personal, I feel the need to report. Okay. Now, it's not as if the people are not available to me by email and they're not available to me by phone. Whatever. I need to make a formal presentation. That is, I have returned. I have returned from the land, and here it is, the land. I have returned, and the people are, and I weave a big sermon. I talk about, give a Dvar Torah. I give this is what I saw. This is what I saw. This is what I saw, and make it into a whole story and a whole presentation. And there's something that's transmitted in that moment, right? My report from the land. Okay. Notwithstanding the fact that anybody in my congregation could just simply click their mouse and get, a live report from, if they speak Hebrew, they understand, they get the live feed from Khan from Channel 11, or they can get I-24 in English with a click, right? They can get in real time, but it's something different when you are reporting. And now that's something that's very human. It's a very human experience when you return from a trip. Now, it could be any trip, but here it has to be Eretz Yisrael. It happens to be Israel. I return from the land, and that's special, right? And that's ceremonial. And so what Moses wants to do here is to create a moment that prepares the people to receive their delegates, to acknowledge them and embrace them, and to say, yes, we can. We're going in.
I see no reason to shoot that down
Okay.
with any of my artillery. But I'm going to put this in a context of like a general Jewish attitude towards human capability. You can imagine a religion, but it is not this one, in which God does all the important stuff. Gamzu Latova, it's just everything's in God's hands, and I'm just a comparatively passive recipient. This is not this religion. This religion is the religion of covenant, of brit, of expectations that human beings can and in fact must do good stuff and do the mitzvot and attain a very impressive success. We to be shutafim l'kadosh baruch hu b'ma'aseh breshit, God's partner in building the world. So we have in the discussion about this, like what's the deal? Were the people like it was a bad idea by Moses and it was the land had already been described as a good land, and now Moses asks, now go on and find whether it's good or not, or does it have a lot of trees or not? Well, you should have already known the answer to that question, and maybe the problem is, that that's a kind of a baseline faithlessness, but I don't think that. I'm going to prefer to interpret that Moses in the delegation of the spies, with God's either begrudging acquiescence or providential planning, said, we're going to do this in the normal course of human events. We're going to learn about it, and that's going to help us. And by the way, the parallel story for the Haftarah, which is in Jericho, that works great. That works just absolutely great. 40 years later. So I think the scouting thing is just a great plan, and the failure comes from the lack of backbone of the 10 spies, or even the 11 spies, because while Caleb and Yehoshua are both praised, it's Caleb who does the speaking. Joshua seems notably silent. They said, even though this may be difficult, we can do it. And the other 10 guys said, well, it looks more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And so the thing that was supposed to nurture their courage and resolve has the exact opposite effect, because they get too frightened.
Right. So what I would add, you made a compelling case, Elliot, so I would agree with Jeremy on this point. But I think that what's not necessarily clear is who is the ceremony for. So when you were talking about yourself coming back from Israel, the ceremony was for you. You felt a need to report. That was the words that you used. So in our story in the Torah, the ceremony fails with both parts. The spies fail because they give a bad report, and the people fail as well because they listen to the wrong group of spies. Rather than listening to Caleb and Yehoshua, they listen to the 10 spies. And that's a tragedy. Because if the idea, and I think what you were alluding to, is that the ceremony is supposed to give a kind of chizuk, a kind of encouragement to the people. The spies go in, they see the land, they're swept away with its beauty, and they're supposed to come back and say, this is the land that God promised us. Thank God we're ready to go. And they can't even say this is the land that God promised us.
Right. It's they reject that, and they reject the whole project. I mean, I'm using this as an example. I mean, if we work through this, I could obviously supply the proof text to create this scene. But think about it this way. Okay, so we started off with sporting events. You have this great scene, it's in movies on championship games where I'll use the hockey analogy, or it's the third period in the locker room. Between the second and third period, what does the coach do? You're down 2 goals. The coach is giving you the "we can do it" speech. Okay, what would be the equivalent in basketball? Do they go into the third? They go into the dressing room after the third quarter?
No, it's the timeout right before the end of the game.
Okay, so from an
I take it you have
anthropological,
seen Hoosiers.
what's
I,
that?
I,
Yeah.
I
Okay,
if you've seen Hoosiers,
I've
Jimmy
seen
Cleveland has
Hoosiers.
to take the
So
final shot.
what's going
Okay,
on? Where does he do that speech? Okay.
in the little timeout, before, and Gene Hackman wants another guy to take the shot, and all the players are like, "Are you out of your mind?"
Yeah.
Jimmy's the guy taking the shot.
Okay. So
Michael Jordan has to take the shot.
from an
Well, so
anthropological point
funny
of
story
view,
about that.
what you go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So the funny story is that the first time they beat Utah, I'm pretty sure Steve Kerr took the winning shot. So the next year, similar situation, they're in the huddle, and Kerr says, "I can shoot it," and he says, "No," and Phil Jackson says, "No, you can't. Michael's taking the shot."
So the fact that I can point to that as a kind of trope or a set piece, right, means that there's an expectation when you're the player, when you're the coach, when you're the audience. Okay, when you're this, you understand that there's something going on there in the moment that the coach interacts with the players. Now, what you expect the coach to say is, "We're going to do this. We're going to do this." And some of the great motivational speeches happen in that moment. Okay, what you don't expect is one of the players to go, "Excuse me for a second. They're
Are
bigger
you out
than
of your mind?
us.
We cannot do this.
Okay, they're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. We should just kind of let's
But
fold it up."
this is the interesting thing, because the spies at first don't lie. The first back of the spies is, this is great. This place is amazing, and we can't do it. And then you get Coach Kalev gives the pep talk, and he says, "Yachol nuchala, yes, we can do this." And then the other spies start lying and say how bad the land is, because
Okay,
they just all their vinegar just got poured right out on the ground,
right.
and they just don't have it anymore. It's
So
it's like the assistant coach is giving the pep talk, and the other coaches are like, "Yeah, yeah, you're dreaming."
so if you're God in this situation, how do you feel? And speaking for God, I would say
An occupational hazard.
Yeah, it is,
I'd
especially
feel
with your
pretty
voice.
bad. I'd feel
Especially with
pretty
your
bad.
voice.
You're ruining my project. My project. I brought Abraham out of Ur Kasdim. I promised him this land. I took you down to Egypt. I took you out of Egypt. I brought you into the desert. I gave you the Ten Commandments. I want you to be a nation on your land. And you're telling me, basically, you're not interested.
By the way, you said about the Abraham part, which is Shlach Lecha and Lech Lecha ring together, in a very resonant way. And then there's what happens next, frankly, is one of the worst stories in the whole Torah. Is that, I wish we had died in Egypt. I wish you had just killed us in Egypt. Why you took us out here to die in the desert? Let's go back to Egypt. And they have the tremendous betrayal. And then the people, God says, you totally blew it, dummies. And then they say, okay, well, we'll try now. And God says, too late. I mean, I hate that story because it's just so not nice. If the master of the world can accept some tshuva, okay, they made a mistake. Let him
Right. But
fix it.
I think the reality is, and the story suggests it, is that we sometimes overestimate the power of a second chance. Not everything can be redone. And once they choose not to go into the land, their time is finished. And there's no way to repair that.
It's
I
interesting
don't, I
you
don't,
mentioned
I
that
don't
after
entirely,
we did the last week on Pesach Sheni, right? Was
I
the
don't
No,
entirely
no, because
understand.
we believe in tshuva. I get it. But not everything can be forgiven in this world. That's a reality.
Yeah.
But okay, of course that is true. I mean, there are mistakes that cannot easily be undone. But um, if, as I generally believe, a major vector in this religion is I'm going to try to teach you how to live up to your responsibilities. And they have missed the magic moment, and that's that's just a tragedy. But here in chapter 14, verse 40, early the next morning, they set out and says, okay, now we're going to go. We were wrong. Okay, when Jews say chatanu, we generally believe there's no se'avon v'afesha v'chata'ah. But then Moses says, don't do that. You're not going to succeed. Do not go up. The Amalekites are going to kill you. And it says, Vaya'apilu la'alot el rosh hahar, va'aron brit Adonai, u'Moshe lo mashu mikerev ha'machaneh. Ya'apilu, leave the word untranslated for a moment. They go up the mountain, but the Ark of the Covenant and Moshe didn't go with them, and that was why it was a total failure. And the Amalekites come and whoop them, and that's a disaster. Now, I just want to point out for those of us who like Hebrew, Vaya'apilu, ayin pei lamed. I'm pretty sure this is the only time that this root appears in the Hebrew Bible, and it doesn't really, you can't really tell by context. If it only appears one time, you can't exactly tell except by context what it is. But the ma'apilim has a modern life. In the Torah, it is a bad word. They did this dumb thing. They did not succeed because they didn't have God's backing. But the people who, in the aftermath of World War II, when the British were not letting more European Jews come in, Aliyah Bet, that illegal Aliyah, where they were called the Ma'apilim, they said, you're just not stopping us. Okay, try to stop us. You're not stopping us. And it's interesting to me that they took that word from like a very interesting biblical context in which it doesn't mean something positive the way it became in the 20th century something positive.
You're talking about this, and I'm thinking like, the golden calf has an echo and reverberation in Jewish religion, and this moment certainly does too. I mean, both moments are articulated in Kol Nidre, but we keep going back to the golden calf as like as really the first major sin, or the major sin, idolatry. We can make a case that this is a worse sin, or can we make the case?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
because this is the sin that for the rabbis took place on Tisha B'Av,
Uh-huh.
and that is the worst day on the Jewish calendar. The golden calf took place on the 17th of Tammuz. So it's a prelude, but this is like the finishing touch. But I wanted to add something to what Jeremy said earlier. And, there is this great tension between forgiveness and not being able to forgiveness. And Jeremy, your condition, as you often are by the rabbinic tradition, which is v'chata'a v'nakeh, when the verse continues, v'lo yinakeh. And so for the rabbis, I think the insight is that forgiveness is always possible, but perhaps in the Torah, it isn't.
In a sense, and I like that point doubly when you think about, in a sense, it's like the prophets who invent tshuva, right? Maybe it's not in Moshe's time. Maybe it's when you get to Hosea and Amos and Yeshayahu that the power of repentance. I mean, it's in the Torah too because it is the 13 midot that we get. And by the way, that is another commonality, right? The 13 midot appear in a slightly different version in the wake of this sin than the one that they have after the golden calf. What was I going to say here about the other thing that you can make the case? Another reason you can make the case why this has a different ramification. I mean, the golden calf. If you sort of pay attention to the numbers, they killed. They executed 3,000 faithless idol worshippers, and Aaron is clearly implicated. Those are bad, but the whole people are not really portrayed as going down that sinful path. Whereas this one comes with a pretty big punishment, 40 years in the desert, and that affects the whole people. So there's a certain kind of objective yardstick of how what the terrible ramifications were of this failure that is perhaps even worse than the other one.
I'm going to offer a different kind of answer here, which is I think it's easier for rabbinic Jews, post-temple destruction Jews, exile diaspora Jews to identify with the suffering of exile than it is to identify with the sin of idolatry. I don't want to be too facetious or cynical, but it's like it's only idolatry. it's all no, idolatry is pretty bad, and idolatry leads to great evil. But it's like, come on, we're not idolaters. None of us sees ourselves as idolaters, even though it's always lurking there in the way that human beings fetishize things and can worship things fine. But we're devoted to you, God. What we experience on a daily basis as rabbinic Jews living in the second, third, fourth century all the way to 1948, we experience exile. We experience the humiliation of exile. We experience powerlessness. We experience murder, persecution, etc. And that state of aimlessness, homelessness, not being able to get to our destination, not living with sovereignty, that's horrible. And therefore, this is the worst experience.
It's interesting that you say that because fair enough, right? Fair enough. The biblical Jew thinks idolatry is, Baal and El are like real problems to the biblical Jew in the way that the post-exilic Jews, it's not. And you sort of want God to say, all right, come on, it ain't that big a deal to me, Master of the universe, if you got this little stone pillar in your house. But Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yecha Elohim acherim al panai are the first big two. I am, and that is not. It does not say the Ten Commandments do not include. And no matter what happens, you shall go live in Eretz Yisrael. The Ten Commandments say there is a relationship, and as is well known, the first two commandments are the only ones in the first person, which the God is the speaker. I am the Lord your God, no other God before me. And then it switches to the third person. Do not take the name of the Lord in vain, for he, third person God, will not will not cleanse you. Moses kicks in his voice. So on the one hand, I can see religiously why one would make the claim that this is a worse betrayal. On the other hand, that's sort of so foundational to Judaism that, and I personally, in my own religious life, personally think that the question of why do I, the question of I must be on the lookout for idolatrous failings, things that I worship that are not the ultimate. Really should only worship the ultimate and not the less than ultimate. And you might even say that there are sometimes among our people an excessive worship of the land itself. I think that can be a Yetzer Hara too. And so, as a 21st century religious person, I'm a little bit more inclined to say this question of how do I resist the attractions of idolatry is kind of spiritually alive for me in a way. Obviously, as an American who loves Israel, who now has an Israeli child, who visits every chance I get, I don't feel like how do I attain the homeland has the same kind of spiritual organizational power for me.
So I think the danger of idolatry is that the substitute that most people come to for God is human beings. I had a teacher, Rabbi Martin Goldman, who used to say that anthropomorphism isn't the problem, imagining God in human form. The real problem is human beings thinking they're God. And I think that once you eliminate the absolute and you cast around for something else to value and believe in, the human being comes to mind. And, certainly a number of ancient cultures, the emperor would become reified. It would become a god after his death. And I think that has a lot of resonance even in today's world.
I just
Even
want
in our
to,
sister religion,
yeah.
our sister religion, that other kind of ancient Judaism, they had a god, man.
Yeah, I want to just go back to the what they're denying here, and why this would be a worse sin, and why this is a sin against God in a different way, and I got to go back to the beginning of the Bible, to Abraham, where God promises Abraham the land, and when you start out at the beginning and you see what kind of hope God has for Abraham and his people, it's like he's saying to Abraham, I have a plan. The plan is you're going to be the father of a great nation, and that you're going to come back and you're going to live in this land. And from this land, what's going to radiate out of this land is my name to the world. And when these schnooky little spies, these scouts, who are
You're talking about Nahbiv and Bapsi over here.
Yeah, right. No, when they were sent out on a ceremonial visit to affirm and ratify this plan, they came back and they gave the speech that kind of sent everybody into a tailspin. What they're doing is they're undermining, and it's lo yaminu, which I'm translating as these. It's not that they don't believe in me. It's that they're undermining the very foundation of trust in my whole story. It's like fundamental to who we are here. That's why the sin is, on this this sin is much worse than idolatry.
Right.
God can handle betrayal, but this he can't handle the undermining of the whole story.
So I think sins involving trust are the ones that are most difficult to forgive,
And
no matter what the level is.
So the trust is not in God. The trust is, in the story. The trust is it's my plan for you included this, and you don't trust me. There, you are undermining that, and therefore you're undermining me, I guess. Well, what's the way to repair this? Tzitzit, the end of the parsha. Well, let's take a word about tzitzit. Just because.
So it's the same verb that appears in, right? The verb in the spy story is latur, appears over and over again. And in the paragraph about tzitzit, we also have that. We wear the tzitzit so that our mind and our eyes will not lead us astray. And one wonders why, in God's infinite wisdom, he didn't put Parshat Tzitzit before the story of the spies. Maybe that would have helped them.
Well, it's a bit of a remedy to have tzitzit and to have a little bit of to have that a flash of holiness. You know, the tzitzit is to be like the holy garment of the Kohen Gadol, and you have that piece of blue which was lost and now regained, and what you are experiencing then is you have the potential to bring back a little holiness, I think, in the tzitzit. Or
I love
Jeremy,
that. I love that. That love the mitzvah of the blue. My my rabbinic colleague Yael Hammerman is leaving to take her own synagogue, and I said I want to buy you a talit, and we didn't really find one that we really wanted, and by the way, these hand woven talitot that I have one, they've like more than doubled in price, so we revised our expectations, but I did put tchelet on her talis as a going away gift, and it's just the wonderful midrash. Why is tchelet? Tchelet looks like the sea looks like the sky looks like the throne of glory. I think that and this is just in the regular Gemara. This is not in like some
yeah, no, it's
mystical.
the Rebbe Meir.
This is and I think it is a meditative exercise. Like you look at your own garment and you feel the vastness of the ocean, you feel the vastness of heaven, and you use your powers of imagination to look up to the divine throne. So when I also might tie my talit a little differently. It's this was a practice of Rav Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal, the great 16th century Kabbalist. His raps were Yud Hey Vav Hey 10 5 6 5.
Yeah.
So on my talit I have 10 5 6 5. It's this beautiful blue, and I feel like I'm wrapped in the ocean and wrapped in heaven.
I don't have such an experience with my tea. Of course, I enjoy and love my talit, and I've not gone out to buy a new set of blue tzitzit. One day, maybe I will. And of course, I think I'm relating to the blue with a less poetic interpretation, which is unlike me, and more polemic, which is that purple represents royalty, and it's not human royalty that we want to represent; it's divine royalty that we want to represent. And
This is true too, right? Because
yeah,
every human being has at least one little thread of royalty in you.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
very nice.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's a good place to end this. We want to thank everyone, the viewers, listeners. I think our numbers are growing. If you like this, share it with people and give us a 5-star rating. That's what people say. I have no idea what that means. No,
Well, at least we know Torah.
share it on YouTube. We must be making YouTube a lot of money because between all of us, we get 0 plus 0 for doing this.
They're taking the entire profit. They get 100% of the profit.
Which goes to show you we shouldn't be using the Torah to be a spade to dig with. Is not. But thank you, viewers and listeners. We appreciate it. We enjoy talking to you and chatting with you and getting your emails and texts and comments. And we look forward to seeing you the next week. Have a beautiful Shabbat on Shabbat Shlach Lekha. Peace in Israel. Quiet. And see you next time on the next edition of Parasha Talk. Bye-bye.
Shabbat Shalom.